In 1968, this small town experienced a very brutal and devastating incident. Despite how severe and intense the Orangeburg Massacre was, this tragic occurrence seems to have been largely forgotten by mainstream history. The massacre claimed the lives of 3 Black students and inflicted serious injuries on 28 others. This was just a few months before the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and at the intensity of the civil rights movement during the amplitude of racism across the United States. Unlike other tragedies related to civil rights, like the Kent State shootings, this tragedy did not receive widespread media coverage or national outrage.
Peace and love, family. Welcome back to the Hope, Helping Our People Elevate. To all our new viewers, thank you for stopping by, and to my returning subscribers, welcome back. Today we're diving into a crucial but often overlooked event in history, the Orangeburg Massacre. I'll be reading an article from the History Channel to shed light on what happened in the tragic night of 1968. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to stay informed on important historical topics. If you find this video valuable, hit that like button, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Were you already aware of this event, or is this some information new to you? Let's discuss and elevate together. Peace and love, family.
On behalf of Akuno Senko for Bay, you know what I'm saying? Jay, where you at? We're trying to help our people elevate. Hope. H-O-P-E. We're giving them hope. We doing what we gotta do, you know. Every day, one step at a time, man. We're gonna make it happen. Helping our people elevate. Yeah. Sometimes I practice focus, thought, and meditate. I'm trying to come with other ways to help our people elevate and seeking knowledge, make me levitate. The lifted mental state is what results from how we orchestrate. This for the family's sake. Let's self-reflect and self-evaluate. And every day, make sure the steps you take, you calculate. Receive a master's fate. I know I can't exist without the hate, but that's okay. I balance that with higher self today. Success is on this way, and after that, my flesh can pass away.
The Orangeburg Massacre occurred on the night of February 8, 1968, when a civil rights protest at South Carolina State University, SC State, turned deadly after highway patrolmen opened fire on about 200 unarmed Black student protesters. 3 young men were shot and killed, and 28 people were wounded. The event became known as the Orangeburg Massacre and is one of the most violent episodes of the civil rights movement, yet it remains one of the least recognized. All-Star Triangle bowling lanes. After the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, segregation had officially ended in much of the South, but it hadn't changed the attitude of some of the white citizens. Many Blacks were still persecuted and discriminated against by whites. One such person was Harry Floyd, owner of the All-Star Bowling Triangle bowling alley in Orangeburg, South Carolina. He claimed his bowling alley was exempt from segregation laws since it was private property, but Orangeburg's Black community was determined to change his mind. Orangeburg was the site of 2 mostly Black universities, South Carolina State and Claflin University. This put the town in the unique position of having more educated Blacks than some other southern states. Many students became involved in the civil rights movement and were determined to turn the tides on racism within their small towns and beyond. Local Blacks tried several times to convince Floyd to integrate his bowling alley. He refused time and again, stating it would offend his longtime clientele. The Orangeburg protest began. On February 5th, 1968, a small group of students from both SC State and Claflin went to the All-Star bowling lanes to protest its white-only policy. Floyd refused them entry, and they left peacefully. Word of Floyd's refusal spread across both colleges' campuses like wildfire. The next night, a larger crowd returned to the bowling alley and were met by police, who threatened to blast them with water from fire hoses. The students fought back by turning them in lighting matches. A plate glass window was broken, and the police began beating students, male and female alike, with billy clubs. Protester Emma McCain later recalled, "I remember feeling a sense of pain when they were beating me. It was almost like they were trying to teach me a lesson or something."
Reports say the students were taunting the fire trucks, but in my estimation, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. But I think fear brought them there, and they just started beating students, and everybody just started running for their lives. And those of us that were at the front of the line, we were then at the back of the line. So we were kind of like helpless. And some of us women were beaten. And personally, I was beaten by 2 officers who had no reason to. I was helpless. It was like they were trying to teach us the lesson.
We were all unarmed. By night's end, 15 students had been arrested, and at least 10 students and one police officer were treated for injuries. Again, word spread quickly about the bowling alley's unrest, enraging students and escalating tension in Orangeburg. Expecting looting and violence, some store owners armed themselves. Governor Robert McNair, supposedly one of the more moderate governors of the Deep South, insisted Black Power leaders were inciting the students' unrest and called in the National Guards, tanks and all, to intimidate the students and squelch the anticipated violence. As y'all can see, my voice is still bothering me, but the student protesters were joined by Cleveland Sellers, a native South Carolinian and civil rights activist. After graduating from Harvard University in 1967, Sellers had returned to South Carolina with the goals of teaching students about Black history. And make sure I go check out that Carter G. Woodson video I did on the introduction of where Black history comes from, Black History Month, which was Negro History Week in the beginning. His activism, however, put him on the governor's radar and earned him a reputation as a Black militant. Violence erupts. By Thursday, February 8th, Sellers and hundreds of students had gathered on SC State campus to protest racial segregation at the bowling alley and other privately owned establishments. National Guard troops and a heavy law enforcement presence commanded by Chief Pete Stroms were also there under orders to keep the protesters on campus and prevent them from inciting a riot. Many of the police officers were armed with shotguns and buckshots. The students started a large bonfire in front of the campus entrance. They taunted law enforcement and threw other objects at them. Eventually, Chief Strom ordered the fire be put out. As firefighters extinguished the fire, a police officer was struck with a heavy wooden banister. Unsure of what was happening and claiming to have heard gunshots, some police raised their guns and opened fire in the darkness upon the protesters for several seconds. Utter chaos and terror ensued as students scrambled to escape. 3 students were shot and killed by the police. Freshman Sammy Hammond was shot in the back. 17-year-old high school student Delano Middleton, whose mother worked at SC State, was shot 7 times, and 18-year-old Henry Smith was shot 3 times. At least 28 protesters were shot and wounded, mostly in the back or side, as they fled the assault. Sellers was shot in the armpit. Media failures and backlash. Sellers was taken into custody at the hospital and charged with inciting a riot. Chief Strom claimed that Sellers took advantage of America's fear of Black power and fired up students who would never have staged resistance on their own. Governor McNair also blamed the incident on Black power agitators. The Orangeburg Massacre happened within the days of the Tet Offensive in the Vietnam War, and as a result was largely ignored by the press. In addition, some press coverage was incorrect. For instance, the Associated Press initially reported that the student protesters had been armed, fired first, and exchanged gunfire with police officers. This was false, although some officers later stated that they had heard small firearms and believed they were being shot at before shooting into the crowd in self-defense. The Black community was appalled at the slaughter and the subsequent bad press. Many took to the streets of protest and demonstrated in Columbia, South Carolina's capital. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. sent a telegram to President Lyndon B. Johnson stating that the deaths in Orangeburg lie on the conscience of Chief Strom and the government of South Carolina. The head of the NAACP traveled to Orangeburg to challenge the media's portrayal of the confrontation. The aftermath of the Orangeburg Massacre. After Sellers' conviction, the state of South Carolina effectively closed the book on the Orangeburg Massacre, despite no one being held accountable for the students killed and injured that night. The lack of justice and conflicting accounts on what had happened inflamed the racial divide between Blacks and white residents of Orangeburg. Even many historians have largely left the incident out of the civil rights article and educational textbooks. Survivors of the Orangeburg Massacre were determined the deaths of Hammond, Middleton, and Smith would not be in vain. In 1999, many joined the white Orangeburg residents and called for healing in the community. In 2003, Governor Mark Sanford offered a written apology for the massacre. In 2006, Cleveland Sellers' son, Bakari, was elected to the South Carolina's legislature. Speaking with emotions at the South Carolina State Memorial Service to honor those lost in the massacre, he said, "We join here today in our own memorial to remember 3 dead and 27 injured in yet another massacre that marked yet another people's struggle against oppression. These men who died here were not martyrs to a dream, but soldiers to a cause." Despite official government apologies, most survivors of the Orangeburg Massacre feel South Carolina continues to suppress knowledge of what really happened. More than 50 years later, they're still haunted by the carnage that took place and vow to continue to honor the victims and work to bring the truth to light to prevent a repeat of the tragedy. As we reflect on the tragedy of the Orangeburg Massacre, let us never forget the lives lost and the courage of those who stood against injustice. This event is a painful reminder of the struggle for civil rights and the sacrifices made in the fight for equality. History like this should never be buried or forgotten. It's up to us to learn, to share, and to continue pushing for justice in our own time. Let's honor the past by staying informed, speaking out, and working towards a better future. If this video moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to keep these important conversations alive. And let's talk in the comments. What are your thoughts on this event? How can we continue to fight for justice today? Peace and love, family. Keep elevating, keep learning, and keep striving for change. Until next time, peace and love.